Hi everybody, I hope you and yours are well. This is Avrohom Czapnik from the Jewish Learning Exchange in Los Angeles. This week's Torah portion is Parshat Shelach, and it begins with the story of the spies. The Jewish people wanted to send spies into the land of Israel. The idea was not a great idea. The Almighty said, if that's what you want, okay, because the Almighty had promised them that it's a land flowing with milk and honey. But nevertheless, the Jewish people wanted to do it. And Moshe asked them detailed questions that they should observe in the land. And unfortunately, they came back with a negative report. And they said, yes, there's many good things there, but there are many bad things there. And their conclusion was that the Jewish people would not be able to conquer the land. Kalev and Yeshua, two out of the 12 tribes, tried to dissuade them and said, with God's help, we'll be able to. But unfortunately, the Jewish people believed the 10 and cried, and it was on the 9th day of the month of Av, and God said, that's going to be a day you cried for nothing, it's going to be a day you're going to cry for something, because in fact the two temples and many other tragedies in Jewish history took place on the 9th day of the Hebrew month of Av. The commentaries ask, what exactly did the spies do wrong? They did report accurately what they saw, and they reported the good and the bad. And that's what Moshe initially told them to do. So why is there a complaint against them? And in fact, it caused that the Jewish people should have to wander in the desert for 40 years. For the 40 days that they were in the land, the Jewish people had to wander in the desert for 40 years. And many of the Jews who left Egypt did not ultimately enter the land. They died in the desert. And the commentators give many different answers, but the Kotzker Rebbe, based upon the Kotzker Rebbe, has a very beautiful insight. What Moshe wanted was them to come back and give him a report, and he would explain to them what was going on. And maybe part of the problem was when they came back, they spoke to Moshe and to Aaron, to all of the Jewish people at the same time. Moshe didn't have a chance to filter and explain. Let me give you an example. One of the things they saw is that many of the people in the land of Canaan were dying while they were there. And really that was a blessing in disguise, because they were so busy with the funerals that they didn't notice these 12 strangers. But again, at face value, they looked at it as, oh, it's a terrible land. The land consumes its inhabitants. And this is a very important idea, the concept that sometimes we look at things that take place and we think they're bad. But really, we don't know the whole picture. As a matter of fact, one expression we have is Gamzu L'Tova, this is also for the good, even though we don't seem like it's for the good. Or another expression, everything that God does is for the good. And we don't always see that. And that's a very important idea. And that's what Moshe wanted. Moshe wanted that they should come to them with the report. And Moshe would give them the right lenses to look through, to see how really it wasn't bad, but it's really a good thing. And instead, they spoke to the entirety of the Jewish people and already turned the tide against going into the land at that time. And there are many, many examples of this, and I'd like to share one example. During World War II, in 1939, when Germany invaded Poland, the Peshwarska Rebbe, a great holy Jew, ran away to Lemberg, which was under Russian occupation at that time. The Russians came and gave them a choice. Would you like to be citizens of this wonderful motherland or not? And people went to the Rebbe and asked him, what does he think? And the Peshwarska Rebbe said, no, do not become citizens of Russia. And people said, no, he's making a mistake. But many listened to the Rebbe, and then what ended up happening was, when those who did not become citizens were taken and shipped out to Siberia. And those people who became citizens said, you see, you should have listened to us, you shouldn't have listened to the rabbi. But what ended up happening? The Germans conquered many parts of Russia that these people were in, and unfortunately they were killed by the Germans. Now Siberia was no summer camp. It took its toll on Jews too, but many, many Jews survived because they were in the Soviet, in Siberia. And more than that, when the war ended, they were able to leave. Those that had signed up and become Russian citizens, the Russians did not allow to leave. So there's a very powerful idea here. When we see a situation, we don't know, is it really good or bad? It may appear to be. A simple example many people know about is if you win the lottery, is that good? Sounds great. But many people, unfortunately, win the lottery and it ruins their lives. They don't know how to deal with it. Of course, we think if I won, I would be different. But nevertheless, sometimes what looks good might not be good, and what looks bad might not really be bad. And that's a very powerful and important idea. And that's one of the powerful lessons of the story with the spies. They saw something bad, but they didn't know that whether it was really bad or not. And that Moshe would have taught them how to look at the view of what God does, that really everything is ultimately for the good. So that's a powerful lesson for us. May we be strong to realize, even when things don't look as wonderful as they could be, God has a plan, and there's a reason why that is happening. And we maybe get to see it, maybe won't get to see it, but there is a plan. And when we look at things in a negative view, that's disastrous, because in fact, it ends up making things worse, just as in the story of the spies. May we look at what God does and have faith that ultimately it's for the good. Short term, long term, we'll get to see it, we won't get to see it, but that's what it is, because everything God does is ultimately for the good. Have a wonderful Shabbos, all the best.